David spent his last $20 on soup for a freezing nurse at the train station. He thought he was saving a poor woman's life. But Sarah Mitchell was worth $500 million. The broke factory worker had no idea this one act of kindness would change everything. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. David Parker pulled his old jacket tighter as he hurried through the railway station. It was past midnight, and the December wind cut through the broken windows like ice. He had just finished his night shift at the factory and was rushing to catch the last train home to his 6-year-old daughter Lucy. As he walked toward the platform, he saw someone sitting alone on a bench. It was a woman in a white nurse uniform, shivering badly in the cold. Her lips were blue and she looked like she might faint at any moment. Most people walked past her without looking. David almost did the same. He was tired, poor, and had his own problems. But something made him stop. "Miss, are you okay?" he asked gently. The woman looked up with exhausted eyes. She was beautiful despite being so cold and tired. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice shook with cold. "You don't look fine," David said. "When did you last eat something?" She didn't answer, which told David everything he needed to know. David looked at his wallet. He had $20 left for the week, money meant for Lucy's school lunch and groceries. But this woman looked like she might die from cold and hunger. "Come on," he said, helping her stand. "There's a small cafe still open. Let me buy you some hot soup." The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell. As they sat in the tiny cafe, David watched her drink the hot soup like she hadn't eaten in days. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," David replied. "Everyone needs help sometimes." Sarah looked at this kind man who had spent his last money on a stranger. His clothes were old and patched. His shoes had holes. But his eyes were warm and caring. "Are you a nurse?" David asked, noticing her uniform. Sarah hesitated. The truth was complicated. "I work in healthcare," she said finally. "That's good work," David said. "My wife was a nurse before she died. She always said nurses are angels who help people heal." "Your wife died?" Sarah asked softly. David nodded sadly. "Cancer 3 years ago. Now it's just me and my little girl Lucy. She's 6 years old and the most important thing in my world." Sarah saw the love in his eyes when he talked about his daughter. This man had lost his wife but still found kindness for a stranger. "What do you do for work?" she asked. "I work nights at the metal factory," David said. "It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work. During the day, I take care of Lucy and try to fix things for neighbors to earn extra money." Sarah felt ashamed. Here was a man struggling to survive, yet he had used his last money to help her. What David didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any nurse. She was the CEO of Mitchell Medical Corporation, one of the biggest hospital chains in the country. She was worth over $500 million. So why was she sitting alone at a railway station in a nurse uniform? 2 weeks ago, Sarah had discovered that her own executives were stealing money meant for patient care. They were buying cheap, dangerous medicines and keeping the profits. When Sarah tried to stop them, they betrayed her. Her own board of directors had voted her out as CEO. They froze her bank accounts and even had her arrested on false charges. Though she was released, she had lost everything overnight. Sarah had worn the nurse uniform because it was the only clean clothes she had left. She had been working as a regular nurse in a small clinic to survive, but even that job was taken from her when her enemies spread lies about her. Now she was alone with no money, no home, and no one to trust. Everyone she thought was her friend had turned away when she lost her power. Except for this kind man who didn't even know who she was. "Where are you staying?" David asked as they finished eating. Sarah looked down. "I don't have anywhere to go right now." David made a decision that surprised even himself. "I have a small apartment. It's not much, but you can sleep on the couch tonight. It's too cold for anyone to be on the streets." Sarah stared at him. "You would let a stranger stay in your home? What about your daughter?" "Lucy is staying at my neighbor's tonight because I work late," David explained. "And my wife always taught me to help people when I can. Besides, you're a nurse. You spend your life helping others." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. This poor man was offering her shelter when her own millionaire friends wouldn't even take her phone calls. David's apartment was tiny and old. The furniture was worn and the heater barely worked. But it was clean and filled with love. Pictures of David and Lucy covered the walls, showing a happy father and daughter making the best of their simple life. "I'll sleep on the floor," Sarah said. "You take the couch." "Absolutely not," David replied. "You're my guest." As Sarah lay on the couch under David's only spare blanket, She couldn't remember the last time someone had shown her such pure kindness. The next morning, David brought Lucy home from the neighbor's house. The little girl had curly brown hair and bright eyes just like her father. "Lucy, this is Miss Sarah," David said. "She's going to stay with us for a few days." Lucy looked at Sarah with curious eyes. "Are you a real nurse?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Sarah said, smiling despite her sadness. "That's so cool," Lucy exclaimed. "My mommy was a nurse too, but she's in heaven now." Sarah felt her heart break for this sweet child who had lost her mother so young. Over the next few days, Sarah watched David care for Lucy with endless love. He walked her to school every morning, helped with homework every evening, and read her stories before bed. Even though they had very little money, Lucy was happy because she felt loved. Sarah helped however she could. She cooked meals with their simple groceries, helped Lucy with her homework, and even fixed their broken radio using skills she had learned years ago. "You're good at everything," Lucy said one evening as Sarah helped her with math. "I've had a lot of practice," Sarah replied, thinking of her business degree and years running a corporation. David worked hard, but money was always tight. One morning, Sarah watched him count coins to buy bread for Lucy's lunch. "Let me help," Sarah said. "I can find work. You're our guest," David said firmly. "Besides, we're managing fine." But they weren't managing fine. Sarah saw David skipping meals so Lucy could eat. She saw him walking to work in the rain because he couldn't afford bus fare. She saw him staying up late fixing neighbors' broken items for a few extra dollars. One evening Lucy got sick with a fever. David was panicked because he couldn't afford to take her to the doctor. "I know some home remedies," Sarah said, using her medical knowledge to help bring down Lucy's fever with cool baths and simple medicines from the pharmacy. "How did you learn so much about medicine?" David asked, amazed at Sarah's skills. "I've been studying healthcare for a long time," Sarah said, which was true in a way. As Lucy got better, she hugged Sarah tightly. "Thank you for making me feel better," she whispered. Sarah realized she had never felt more useful than in that moment. 3 weeks passed. Sarah had been sleeping on David's couch, sharing their simple meals and helping care for Lucy. She had never been happier, even though she had lost everything. But the past was about to catch up with her. One evening, while David was at work and Lucy was asleep, Sarah's phone rang. It was her lawyer, James Wright. "Sarah, where have you been?" he asked urgently. "I've been trying to reach you for days." "What's the point?" Sarah said quietly. "They took everything." "That's what I'm calling about," James said excitedly. "We found proof that Marcus Webb and the board members were stealing money. The FBI arrested them yesterday. All charges against you have been dropped, and you're being reinstated as CEO immediately." Sarah felt dizzy. After weeks of having nothing, she was suddenly powerful again. "There's more," James continued. "The board wants to give you a $50 million settlement for the trouble they caused. And 3 other companies want to merge with Mitchell Medical. You could be worth over $1 billion within a year." Sarah looked around the tiny apartment that had become her home. She thought about David working the night shift and Lucy sleeping peacefully in the next room. "I need time to think," she said. The next morning, Sarah knew she had to tell David the truth. But before she could speak, Lucy came running in with a newspaper she had found outside. "Look, Daddy," Lucy said excitedly. "There's a picture of someone who looks just like Miss Sarah." David took the newspaper and his face went white. The headline read, "Missing CEO Sarah Mitchell found billion-dollar fortune restored." David stared at the picture of Sarah in an expensive business suit, then looked at the woman who had been sleeping on his couch and helping with dishes. "You're Sarah Mitchell," he said quietly. "The Sarah Mitchell. You own Mitchell Medical Corporation." Sarah saw the hurt and confusion in his eyes. "David, I can explain. You're one of the richest people in the country," David continued, his voice filled with shock. "And you've been pretending to be just a regular nurse." "I wasn't pretending," Sarah said desperately. "I really was just a nurse when you found me. I had lost everything." "But you didn't tell me who you really were," David said. "You let me pay for your food with my last $20. You let me worry about having enough money for groceries while you're worth millions." Lucy looked confused and scared. "What's happening? Why is Daddy upset?" David felt angry and embarrassed. He had been treating one of the richest women in America like a charity case. She had probably been laughing at his simple life and tiny apartment. "You need to leave," he said coldly. "I'm sure you have important business to attend to, Miss Mitchell." "David, please listen. Sarah began. "No," David said firmly. "I don't know why you were playing this game, but it's over. Lucy and I don't need your pity." Sarah felt her heart breaking. It wasn't pity. These have been the happiest weeks of my life. Happy? David laughed bitterly. You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. How could living in this tiny apartment make you happy? Because for the first time in my life, someone cared about me for who I am, not what I have, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. But David was too hurt to listen. His pride was wounded and he felt like a fool. Please go, he said quietly. Just go. Sarah packed her few belongings with a heavy heart. As she reached the door, Lucy ran to her and hugged her legs. Don't leave us, Miss Sarah, Lucy cried. I love you. Sarah knelt down and hugged the little girl tightly. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. She looked at David one last time, hoping he would change his mind. But he turned away. Chapter 10. Life goes on. Sarah returned to her old life as CEO. She had a luxury penthouse, expensive cars, and more money than she could ever spend. But she felt empty inside. Every day she thought about David and Lucy. She wanted to help them, but she knew David's pride wouldn't let him accept her money. David tried to return to his normal life too. But everything reminded him of Sarah. The couch where she slept, the kitchen where she cooked their meals, Lucy's homework that Sarah had helped with. Lucy cried every night, asking when Miss Sarah was coming back. David didn't know what to tell her. Did we make Miss Sarah sad, Daddy? Lucy asked one evening. It's complicated, sweetheart, David said, holding his daughter close. But she was like family, Lucy said. She made us happy and we made her happy too. Isn't that what matters? David realized his 6-year-old daughter was wiser than he was. 2 months passed. David heard on the news that Sarah had donated $100 million to build free medical clinics for poor families. She had also started a scholarship program for single parents who wanted to study nursing. Despite his hurt feelings, David felt proud of her generosity. One evening, as David walked home from work, he saw a familiar figure sitting on the same bench at the railway station where they had first met. It was Sarah, wearing simple clothes and looking sad. David's first instinct was to walk away. But he remembered his wife's words, "Good people make mistakes, but they deserve forgiveness." "What are you doing here?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Remembering the night my life really began," Sarah said softly. "Not when I became CEO again, but when a kind man bought me soup with his last $20. David was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me who you were from the beginning?" "Because for the first time in my adult life, someone liked me for me," Sarah explained. "Not for my money or power. Just for being Sarah. Do you know how rare that is?" David began to understand. "You were afraid I would treat you differently." "Everyone treats me differently when they know I'm rich," Sarah said. "They want things from me or they act fake around me. But you and Lucy just accepted me as part of your family." "We did, didn't we?" David said, remembering how natural it had felt to have Sarah in their lives. "David," Sarah said, turning to face him, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer." "What is it?" "I want to offer you a job as the director of my new foundation for single parents," Sarah said. "It would pay well enough for you to quit the factory and spend more time with Lucy. You would help other families like yours get the support they need." David was quiet for a long time. "Why me?" "Because you understand what it's like to struggle," Sarah said. "You know what single parents really need because you've lived it. And because you're the most genuinely good person I've ever met." "This isn't charity?" David asked. "This is me needing the right person for an important job," Sarah said. "Someone I can trust completely." David thought about Lucy, about being able to spend more time with her, about helping other families who were struggling like they had been. "I'll need to think about it," he said. "Of course," Sarah said. "But David, there's something else. Something more important than any job." She took a deep breath. "I'm in love with you. And I love Lucy like she's my own daughter. These past 2 months without you both have been the loneliest of my life." David felt his heart skip a beat. "Sarah dash. I know it's complicated," she continued. "I know my money makes everything difficult. But money doesn't matter if you're alone. I would give up every penny I have to go back to sleeping on your couch and helping Lucy with homework." "You don't mean that," David said. "I do," Sarah said firmly. "The happiest I've ever been was in your tiny apartment, eating simple meals and reading bedtime stories to Lucy. That felt like home in a way my mansion never has." David looked at this amazing woman who had everything but valued the simple love of his small family above all her wealth. "What are you really asking me?" he said. "I'm asking if you could ever love me back," Sarah said quietly. "Not Sarah Mitchell the CEO, but just Sarah, the woman who loves you and Lucy more than anything in the world." David was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. Lucy asks about you every day, he said. She made me promise to find you and bring you home. And what do you want? Sarah asked. David smiled for the first time in months. I want my family back together. When David and Sarah walked into the apartment together, Lucy screamed with joy and ran into Sarah's arms. I knew you'd come back, Lucy said, hugging Sarah tightly. I knew Daddy would find you. Sarah looked around the small apartment that had once seemed so humble. Now it looked like the most beautiful place on earth because it was filled with the people she loved. Are you going to stay forever this time? Lucy asked. Sarah looked at David, who nodded and smiled. If you'll have me, Sarah said. Of course we will, Lucy said. Your family? That night, as they sat together on the old couch, Lucy fell asleep between David and Sarah. David looked at the woman who had entered their lives as a stranger and become the missing piece of their family. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Now we figure out how to blend your world and mine, Sarah said. I don't want to change who we are. I just want us to be together. What about your company? Your responsibilities? I'll still be CEO, Sarah said. But I'll work from home more. And we'll use my resources to help other families. Together. David smiled. Lucy's going to love having a mom again. And I'm going to love being her mom, Sarah said, stroking the little girl's hair. David stood in front of a new community center that served hundreds of single-parent families. The sign read, The Lucy Parker Center for Families, named after his daughter who had insisted that any center should be named after kids, not adults. As director of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, David had helped over 1,000 families find jobs, housing, and support. Sarah had been right. His experience as a struggling single parent made him perfect for the job. Sarah had kept her promise to blend their worlds. They lived in a nice house now but not a mansion. They had enough money to be comfortable, but they still shopped at regular stores and ate at simple restaurants. Sarah had learned to value the ordinary moments that made life meaningful. Daddy, look. Lucy called out, running toward them in her new school dress. At 7 years old, she was confident and happy, secure in the love of both her parents. What is it, sweetheart? David asked. Miss Rodriguez says I can help read to the little kids at the center, Lucy said excitedly. Just like Mommy Sarah reads to me. Sarah smiled at being called Mommy Sarah. It was the most precious title she had ever earned. That evening, as they sat together reading bedtime stories, Sarah thought about the night David had found her freezing at the railway station. She had lost everything that night, but she had also found everything that truly mattered. What are you thinking about? David asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Just remembering the luckiest night of my life, Sarah said. The night you got your company back? Lucy asked. No, sweetheart, Sarah said, pulling both David and Lucy close. The night your daddy found me and brought me home. Outside, snow began to fall gently, covering the world in a blanket of white. Inside their cozy home, a family born from kindness and love settled in for another peaceful night together. Sometimes the most important moments in life happen when we're not looking for them. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can change everything. And sometimes the person who needs saving the most is the one who appears to have it all. David Parker had been just a factory worker trying to get home to his daughter. Sarah Mitchell had been just a woman in need of help. But together they had created something beautiful, a family built on love, trust, and the understanding that the richest life is one filled with people who matter.